Warning: the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
It is the Savage Nation. We're living through strange times. The dance of death in the West, the actualities of death from the Islamists. Meanwhile, the prince entertains himself with 1,000 sycophants in the White House, partying on, locking himself behind closed walls as though the Islamist hand will not touch him. He thinks he's protected from this new plague. Let me explain something to you in my studies over the last week. I'll repeat what I learned, and it's not novel, nor is it original. We're facing a phenomenon that the West has not known since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th century. Religious wars. When they ended in one place, they began in another, and they lasted for over 100 years. We have the same factors present right now. Did you hear me? We have religious wars right now. The Muslims are on the warpath, and they are against everyone else. They're against Muslims who are not as fanatical as them. They think they're going to take us back to a pristine time in human history, which is such rubbish it's beyond belief. When you consider they live like pigs after capturing 8-year-old girls and raping them and then say the Quran says it's okay. Don't tell me they're pure. They're not pure. They're phony killers. Nazis. Nazis wearing headscarves and quoting the Quran do not make them not Nazis. The atrocities are still atrocities. It's not a purity they're going to drag us back to. It's a barbarism the world has not seen in 1,200 years. It's a revolution that's going on. And we have a man in the White House who denies its existence. But make no mistake about it, whether he denies it or accepts it, it's ongoing. And as a brilliant man named Jonathan Sacks, I think he was once the chief rabbi of England, said in a recent speech, there is a difference between a starfish and a spider. A decapitated spider dies, but a starfish can regenerate itself from a single amputated leg. Radical political Islam is a starfish, not a spider. And though Al-Qaeda and ISIS may be defeated, they will come back in other guises under other names. Why you would bring in Muslims who are not vetted into a nation at this time without vetting them down to their last strand of DNA is beyond me. Because many of them will radicalize if they're not radical before they get here. Only an insane prince would do this to us. But of course, it's not that he's so insane. He's stoned on the doxy of the progressive left. They're drunk on their progressivism. They think that they're going to enter a liberal utopia by continuing their march against all values, traditional and conservative. This is, of course, how past civilizations declined. Cut off, narcissists, cut off, involved only in me, and pleasure-seeking, and they can't defend themselves at the end. They keep on partying. They keep on partying. So where does that leave us, we the people? It leaves us without a government. It's not a government at all. It's not a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's a government of power and force over all of us, not for all of us. It's a government of the lobbyists, by the lobbyists, and for the lobbyists. There were 2 Supreme Court rulings which are pretty interesting. They threw a bone to the fiscal conservatives, these wonderful, wonderful liberals on the Supreme Court, threw us a bone today. And they said, okay, the EPA overstepped. You can keep burning coal. So, oh, well, gave us gay marriage, Obamacare last week. Oh, but we can still burn coal this week, see? They said, okay, we're not that bad. Then they said the lethal injections that are being used, they're legal. They can continue to use them. And then someone sends me an email about Edgar Allan Poe and his story, The Masque of the Red Death, 1842. And I said, holy God. I said, oh, my God, Edgar Allan Poe is writing about Obama. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness and then profuse bleeding at the pores. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men, and the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. With his dominions, when his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. The wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair or frenzy from within. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these in security were within. Without was the Red Death. If that does not describe the sorority and the little lighthearted fraternity around Obama, I'd like to know what does. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these in security were within the walls. Without was the Red Death. Well, you know how this ends, don't you? It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th months of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. Oh, did he entertain them? And I'm not going to read the entire story, The Mask of the Red Death by Poe, 1842, but I will tell you how it ends. You want to know how it ends? You know how it ends, don't you? See, Obama thinks that all the troubles of the world can be pushed away because he owns NBC, which just attacked Donald Trump for speaking the truth. He owns ABC, he owns CBS, he owns CNN, he owns Fox News to about a 90th percentile. He has no opposition whatsoever except the churches and a few voices in the wilderness. And the prince locks himself in behind closed walls with his 1,000 friends, party on party on party on party. And he doesn't even think about the Christians who are being slaughtered. He doesn't think about the Yazidi girls who are being raped and sold into slavery. He talks about slavery 150 years ago while slavery is going on right now, and he does nothing, doesn't lift a finger to the ongoing slavery. And so I say to myself, there's a story here that's both secular and religious. At least that's how I saw it. And it ends badly. It ends very badly for all of us. And it ends like this. And now is acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. Let's hope this despairing image of the plague in that time is just a metaphor for this maddening prince in the White House who has created havoc around the globe. He has created havoc, and he lights the White House in the rainbow colors and does nothing to stop the rapes and the murders, doesn't even mention them. And his little friends like Jake Tapperhead, his little friends at ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox News barely mention the plague of murder, rape, kidnapping, slavery being enacted by the Islamists who continue their march, their march, their march, their march. Now that these justices declared that homosexual marriage is a fundamental right, and they say that anyone objects is a bigot, which demeans the human dignity of homosexual citizens, what does that mean for people of faith? How is that going to affect religious Americans? How will that affect houses of worship? Should radical gays threaten lawsuits when they're denied weddings? And that would be mosques, churches, synagogues, Mormon temples. What will the mosque do when a gay couple tries them? They probably won't try them because they know they're too hard to deal with. They'll go for the Catholic Church. They've already been victorious there. What about religious colleges, adoption agencies, schools, healthcare facilities, where deeply held religious beliefs conflict with the so-called rights that these 9 in black robes granted to homosexual couples? Tell me what will happen. We don't know what's going to happen. I think I know what's going to happen. I know pretty much what's going to happen. especially if we get a radical Democrat president like Hillary Clinton. I know just what's going to happen. You can look to China, where China cooperates with patriotic churches that are willing to work with its Communist Party and persecutes underground churches such as evangelical and Catholic churches that insist on their independence and the Word of God. I know what's going to happen here. In Turkey, there's a two-tiered system of religion. The government funds Islamic education, builds new mosques with government funds, and restricts the activities of Christians. I know what's coming to America. This is government at its worst. The government at its worst. The Supreme Court has decisively rejected the U.S. Constitution and thrown our government into the business of managing our relationship with God, those of us who still believe in God. That's the opinion of most people of faith, not just mine. And we are now, on the other hand, facing a war, a religious war, as I said to you earlier, not known since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th century. And they ended in 100 years later, where these religious wars began in one place, they began in another, much like the pestilence that we see now in Tunisia the other day. You didn't even see that on Fox News. Couldn't find it. Martha Washington was busy talking about everything but that. She wouldn't touch it. To Fox News, the Islamist issue is on a cordon sanitaire. Never mention it. They're much like Obama with that. And so it's a dangerous time. I kept trying to find pictures of the guy executing people on a beach with a machine gun. I couldn't believe this. And by the way, remember after that terrible tragedy in South Carolina when that lunatic coward shot up those black people? And Obama had the audacity of lies to get up there and say, this happens only in America, it doesn't happen in Europe? Duh. He forgot about the Hebdo massacre, where Jews and others were assassinated by Muslim fanatics. It happened there, and they have gun control. It didn't happen in Tunisia last week, where they have severe gun control. How'd that happen, Mr. Obama? I guess the sorority didn't report on that to you. You were too busy partying on at the ball. Did you even know what happened in Tunisia, Mr. Obama? Or were you busy looking at the presents that your wife brought back from her shopping trip to Italy, Mr. Obama? Do you know what's going on in the Middle East, Mr. Obama? Do you know about 8-year-old girls who are being kidnapped because they're not Muslims and sold off as slaves, Mr. Obama? Do you know that's even happening, or are you planning another party tonight in the White House? I'll be right back.
Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com.
Thank you.
And I got to go back again to saying to you that as the West dies and falls into deeper degeneracy, if you want to call it that, I don't know what else to call it. Pardon me. It's how I was raised. I haven't been re-educated. As we sink further and further into debauchery and lose all of our connection to reality, the Islamists continue to march on. And so I say to you, there's some mystical element going on here. There's a balance here. There's a balance. There's God's hand involved in all of it. So many Christians think these are signs of end times. Called a mystical Jewish rabbi. Not all rabbis are mystical. Most of them are not. Most of them are just schmendricks. Most rabbis that I've met, the liberal kind, are basically comedians who couldn't get a job in a comedy club. My experience. They think their job as a rabbi is to tell jokes on Friday night and sell bagels and lox on the side, or hummus now today, whatever they sell, and not even reference God because it's an embarrassment to the congregation. That's a Reformed temple today. So I called a mystical rabbi, and I said to him, many Christians think that these are end times. He immediately said, no, to the Jewish mind, these are the beginning times. We don't see it at the end of times. He said, we see mystically, these are the beginning of times. This is God's way of telling us there's a new beginning emerging, that people will awaken to what's going on, and it will be a new beginning for man on earth. So I said, that's interesting. I'm going to learn more from him, perhaps next weekend. They're sending down a real heavyweight from somewhere to meet with me, because I want to talk about this. It's not like we sit with some crystal ball or anything, but I want to hear what they have to say from their point of view. How do they live in a time like this? I'm going to talk about God then. You want me to talk about God? Since I'm talking about mysticism, I'll tell it to you over and over again. My career ended before it began, and then it took off like a rocket. And then I was put through a trial and tribulation with one of the worst people on the planet. Went on for years, tortured, persecuted, threatened. Day in and day out, no one knew what I was living with. Nobody knew what I lived with. Another man would have left and said, enough is enough, I don't need this garbage. But I had a bigger mission. I ignored the evil that was doing it to me. And then when I thought the career was over, the Red Sea parted for me, and the Sea of Cumulus opened to me overnight, out of nowhere, and I had to walk on hot coals for a year. You don't know that either. I was given a night show. You remember my night show? You know how hard that was for me, that adjustment? It was walking on hot coals. I didn't think I could survive it. It threw my life upside down, but I wanted to do it. I had to do it. It was a mission. And I waited and waited and waited for what I have now, which are the biggest stations in the country during drive time on the East Coast, reaching more people than I ever reached in my life with my simple message. And I believe that there's a reason for it. And the reason is for me and you to talk on a daily basis. And that's the thing I'm trying to tell you. There's some kind of thing going on here that goes beyond humanity and just human beings. So there it is. What about Greece? What about Puerto Rico? What about gay marriage? What about the 2 Supreme Court rulings today that you missed that I told you about? You heard about them? They gave us the needle and they gave us the coal. They threw it at us. They said, oh, good for you. Look at that. Oh, you don't like the gay marriage thing. I tell you what, you right-wing nuts. We're going to give you could have all the coal you want. And if that's not good enough for you to show that we're not that bad, we're going to throw in the needle. You're allowed to execute people with that concoction that the liberal fanatics say is cruel and unusual punishment. Go ahead, take a walk, move on, forget the gay marriage already. The politicians in black robes, the libs, the 5 libs. Of course, there's a 4-4, and then there's one split guy who was appointed by Ronald Reagan, the great hero. Kennedy, the great hero, Ronald Reagan, the genius, could do no wrong. What's wrong with people? They put Ronald Reagan on a pedestal. I don't understand it. How did they come to believe that Ronald Reagan was God, chosen by God to be president? Where'd they come up with that rubbish? I mean, he used to do 20 Mule Team Borax. I remember that show as a kid. Nice actor, reasonably decent president, good speaker, good writer. He gave us Justice Kennedy, along with Edwin Meese and the little lawyers who worked for Edwin Meese, who now pose as talk show hosts. The whole thing is a game. It's all a charade. One-party system, all ganged up against the people. It's that simple.
Savage.
Welcome back to the Savage Nation. We're talking about doublespeak. We're talking about the corruption of America, the corruption of the West, the death of the West, corruption of language. The example that I've been using today is the alleged conservative leader of England, or Britain, Cameron, saying to the BBC that ISIS is not Islamic. It's beyond belief, the doublespeak. And you have to ask yourself, why are they doing this? They're doing it because they are corrupt politicians who do not want to lose the Muslim vote. It's that simple. Just as Obama continues to lie about the type of immigrants we're getting, saying they all come here to work, they all are family people, there are no criminals. We all know that's a bunch of garbage. 1/3 of all prisoners are illegal aliens. You haven't heard that in a while, have you? 1/3. It hasn't changed. It probably went up. Rapists, murderers, you name it. 1/3 of all prisoners are illegal aliens. So don't tell me they all come here to work. It's impossible to even believe they would be saying things like this. And why does Obama do it? Because the demographics have told him that the middle class is gone for him. The middle class knows what he is. They know he's a rank and file member of the Internationalist Brigade, wants to erase the borders of America, wants to replace Christianity as a religion, wants to subjugate the people of America who work for a living. And so he's written you off. And so his new demographics are prisoners, illegal aliens, you name it. Put them all together and they're a majority. He's a corrupt politician. Corruption of language, corruption of politicians, corruption of a nation, death of a nation. I want to play for you quickly, Jonathan Sachs from England, a piece that I found on YouTube about the religious war we are involved in clip 29.
We are facing a phenomenon in that the West has not known since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th centuries. When they ended in one place, they began in another, and they lasted for more than a century. The same factors present then are present now. 1. Discontent with an existing power, widely conceived to have been corrupt. Then the Catholic Church, today's secular nationalist regimes.
Did you hear that? It was a discontent with an existing power widely conceived to have been corrupt, then the Catholic Church, and today secular nationalist regimes. Well, today we have something worse than we had with the discontent of the Catholic Church then. We have a naked Marxist posing as a pope. I said it, I live by it. I've never seen anything like it. The corruption of the West is so advanced that the language itself has been corrupted by Orwellian politicians and news people. Obama and Cameron, in my opinion, represent corruption of language, a corruption of the language itself. Oh, we know what corruption is. That would be the Clinton Library in the minds of millions of people, where we hear that Hillary asked $275,000, for example, for a speech. They didn't want to pay it at some obscure university. They hired instead the nobody, the nonentity, the daughter. The nonentity daughter. The girl who can't finish a sentence unless it's written for her. And she asked for $65,000 for a 10-minute speech, I swear to God. $65,000 she would speak for 10 minutes. Tell me, that's not corruption? There's never been a time like this in the history of the United States or of the West where the nation and the West is so perversely and systematically dedicated to the perversion of language, in addition to special interests, earmarks, log rolling, vote trading, sweetheart deals, that the system itself is dead in the water. Why do you think that you, the people, have such a low opinion in every poll of Congress? An opinion ranging between 8 and 12% approval rating. Because you know they're corrupt. You know that they're not doing anything for us. You know that they're all like John Boehner, a double-talking drunk, in my opinion. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, it's always been like this. That's the easy way out. The cynic listening to this program would say, what's he complaining about? Politicians have always been corrupt. Well, that is true, but never at this level. Number two, never has national security been so degraded in a nation, in our nation in particular, that the leader of our nation would not even attend the meeting of world leaders last year after the Hebdo massacre, where Muslims, M-U-S-L-I-M-S, Muslims attacked cartoonists, killing many, and then attacked Jews in a grocery store. World leaders met to condemn world terrorism. The only one not there was your phony, double-talking president, Barry Obama. He wouldn't even attend. Now we wake up, and the other day, while the White House was lit up in the rainbow colors to celebrate what? What were they celebrating? The ascension of 2% of the population? And they changed the colors of the White House to represent 2% of the population with rainbow lighting? Does it get any crazier than that? A 2% minority wins because of a corrupt Supreme Court, which in my opinion is obviously being bribed. There is no explanation for what the Supreme Court has done, other than they are owned lock, stock, and barrel by the Obama administration. No doubt the NSA spying was aimed largely at them. That's my opinion. There's nothing else to explain it. And you know the biggest disgrace of all, well, we know that. Well, we talk about John Boehner. His name's going to become a verb for something, Boehner. You're going to say, oh, yeah, well, I have to figure that one out, all the different forms of Boehner. Could you imagine, because he became a stooge of Obama, Obama let him ride an Air Force One. Did you see that picture on Drudge over the weekend? Astounding, where he morphed the two faces, Boehner and Obama, into one face. And the little boy Boehner was given a ride on Air Force One. Did you see that? Could you believe this story? This guy is such an embarrassment to the human race. The drunk, I called him a drunk, clink, it didn't matter. Stabbed America in the back, stabbed the country in the back, gutted the Statue of Liberty. Unbelievable to me. Went along with Obama on everything, and Obama rewarded him. The prince took him on Air Force One, and the little boy was given a certificate, which he held up in the air, showing that he rode on Air Force One. Could you believe this? That this is what we have as the so-called opposition? This is how far the country has fallen? Well, am I surprised? No. When I began in radio in 94, I said we have a one-party system. Oligarchs, Democrats or Republicans. One party, three-card Monty with no P under the shells. That's all. It's all a game. Shuck and a jive. Don't tell me about 2016. It's over. There's no need for the election. It's all a game. No one can win. It's a rigged machine. It's like going to Las Vegas and think you're going to come home rich. Yeah, right. Go elect a Republican. For what reason? Tell me the reason to elect a Republican, for any reason whatsoever. All right, I get it. Oh, let's see. Lower taxes, and you can burn coal and use an injection on death row. Okay, I got it. Okay. And what else are they going to do for you? Social issues? Yeah, right. Social issues, Republicans, are you joking? well, fiscal matters or fiscal Republicans. Fiscal Republicans? Remember what George Bush did to you in the last 3 months of his regime? He jacked down the entire economy. He jackhammered the economy. He gave us Obama. You think they're not going to do it again? Do you think someone's going to lose money if this economy crashes? You're telling me people who made billions the last time are not going to make billions again this time? You think George Soros is on the sidelines in Greece? Are you kidding me? That guy's trading money faster than the guys who traded money in the back of the temple when Jesus said, throw the money changes out of the temple. Social unrest. Dow plunges 300. PM asks for patience. Government official says we're going to default tomorrow. World defenseless against next financial crisis. There's a picture of Trump. NBC now gave him a knife in the back. I hope he gets even with the Zucker. I really do. NBC Universal cuts ties with Donald Trump. I hope there's a contract and he can hang them out to dry. NBC Universal, under pressure from an array of Hispanic groups, is severing its business ties to presidential candidate Donald Trump because he said the truth. He does nothing with dignity. The country is being overrun by illegal aliens, many of whom are criminals. We know that there's a drug corridor running right out of Mexico into America. There was a whole report on it on CNBC. It's no mystery. So why shouldn't Trump speak the truth when he's speaking the truth? So what happened is NBC said we're cutting all ties with you. The fascists at NBC. Trump's opinions do not represent those of NBC, blah, 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 blah. I believe that Trump should sue them if he has a contract. He should break them over his knee. I'm sorry. I am sorry for these fascists at the networks to not permit freedom of speech is exactly what they've been doing anyway all these years. When have you last heard your viewpoint represented on NBC? Huh? Now, I realize he may not become president because he's never been a community organizer, and he probably never read Alinsky. He may have had Alinsky as an accountant when he was young, one of Alinsky's cousins, but I don't think he's ever read Alinsky, so he has no organizing experience in the community level. Stop the coming civil war, huh? Who wrote that? Raise your hand if you bought the book, Stop the Coming Civil War. Raise your other hand if you bought the book, Countdown to Mecca. Raise your hand if you know who wrote those books. Obama's engaged in a civil war from the day he began. Who told you that this guy was conducting a civil war against every institution you believed in? Don't stop talking about it. Don't be intimidated by him. This man is trying to burn the country down. Why? The insane left will not be satisfied until you're absolutely powerless. And where's the illegal immigrant in all of this? They all work hard and pay taxes. Really? What taxes? What taxes have they paid? Mexico is home to the world's largest drug cartel. We're the largest customer. Trump said so. He had the nerve to say so. So here we are. We're in a war right now. We're in a war right now. And we have a mob running America. They want absolute control over everyone's speech. I hope Trump fights back and wins. I hope he runs. I really hope he runs. Remember, he was on my show a week before I left? And I asked him point blank. Remember the first question? I didn't mince words. I said, look, Donald, many people feel you're running as a stealth third-party candidate to undercut whatever Republican chances may be, not that it matters anymore, to elect Hillary. Remember he paused for about 40, 50 seconds, and you didn't think you were going to get an answer? Raise your hand if you remember that. Thank you. Thank you in the back of the room. I let him run out. I let him run out like the great whale he is. And I didn't say, answer the question. I didn't do that. I'm not a gotcha guy. And then Donald came back and said, I guarantee you, Michael Savage, I'm not running on a third-party ticket. I'm running as a Republican. I'm a lifetime Republican. I'm not out to split the ticket. You heard it. He made news on this show, but no one reported it because I'm not a member of the Rush Cartel. I'll be right back.
Savage.
Hey, our Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust for wealth insurance, gold and silver. Call 800-BUICOIN.
This is not the war between Islam and the West, which ISIL want people to believe. It is a generational struggle between a minority of extremists who want hatred to flourish and the rest of us who want freedom to prosper. And together we will prevail.
What sadness is in my heart to have to listen to this corrupt politician lie about the realities of the day. 30, 40, 50 Britishers sitting on a beach under an umbrella, harming nobody, executed by a radical Muslim in the name of Islam. Probably 100 or more injured. Holiday makers, poor people. No one rich goes to Tunisia. Poor working British people who saved up for a holiday, who went to that nation of Tunisia. And by the way, most Tunisians are not radicalized. I want to say that. Tunisians themselves have suffered at the hands of the radical Muslims in ways you could never imagine. Of course it's a war. Of course it's a war. It's not the perversion of a great religion. It's the fundamentalist interpretation of this religion. What, do you have to be a fool to understand that? No, it's not a perversion of the religion. It's in the Quran, for God's sakes. It says kill the infidel. You idiots, you. Many of you liberals went out and bought a Quran after 9/11. I actually know someone, a lawyer. Right after 9/11, he went out and bought a Quran. I said, what are you doing that for? He says, well, I want to understand who they are. I said, you want to understand? Well, they've been teaching you who they are for quite a while now. Going back to the Crusades, they've been teaching you who they are. I guess you didn't learn it in your public school. In my great novel, Countdown to Mecca, there's a plot where a group of U.S. generals plot to blow up Mecca during the Hajj, thinking they'll take out the most radical members of Islam. Well, my hero, Jack Hatfield, knows that that's a disastrous mistake, and that if they did that, they would radicalize all of Islam. And so my book is the opposite of what the liberals have said it is, and that's why the New York Times banned it from the bestseller list, even though the book beat 5 books in count of numbers sold. They made believe it didn't exist. So the book is about Jack Hatfield stopping the attack. And the generals, one of the greatest segments of the novel is where the generals meet and discuss why they want to blow up Mecca. It's one of the most interesting passages. It's a political thriller, and I really recommend you read it for July 4th if you haven't gotten it yet. Countdown to Mecca in bookstores now. And I want you to look at it. It's very important. It's a great book for July 4th. But getting back to the death of the West, Obama lights the White House up in the rainbow colors the same day that Muslims, M-U-S-L-I-M-S, go on a rampage throughout Europe to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the rise of ISIS, which Cameron says doesn't exist. And what they do? A factory owner has his head cut off by a Muslim in Paris, and his head's put on a fence. A mosque is blown up in Kuwait. Dozens are killed. Muslim killing Muslims because they're not, let us say, pure enough for one side or the other of this madness. And in Tunisia, an ordinary guy, a master's student in engineering, picks up a Kalashnikov, goes on a beach, and executes, we don't even know how many. Cameron knows it's higher than 30. It might be 50. He shot men, women, and children in cold blood, and he did not kill Muslims. He did not shoot any Muslims. He shot only non-Muslims. So don't tell me that we're not living through the perversion of language and the death of the West. We are very clearly living through the perversion of language and the death of the West. And you got to ask yourself why. Why would Cameron, notably Cameron, why would he lie about the Islamic State like this when he knows they are the Islamic State in their mind? How could he say they're not the Islamic State? He's defining them for them? Well, would you say the British Empire still exists? Let's redefine the British Empire. Where is the British Empire? It exists on shelves in the back rooms of patriots in England who remember the British Empire. There's no British Empire. There's no Britain anymore. And if Obama is not stopped before the end of his madness is over, there will be no America anymore. He is merging the United States of America into a North American trade zone where Mexico and the United States will become one hodgepodge where we inherit the poorest, the least educated, and the most diseased of Mexico.
Savage. Warning. The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
I love this song. This is a summer song. 1959. I call it the Shabab Shabab song. People used to do submarine watching on the Belt Parkway in this, with this song playing on the radio, fogging up the windshield. It's too slow though for this day and age, isn't it? Like you got to be on glue to listen to this song, like horse glue. Mayor de Blasio signs an act which says it's illegal for an employer to ask for criminal records. I could ask you how you feel about that. How does it make you feel that a convict could be driving your kids to school? What will happen when de Blasio turns New York into the next Ferguson or Baltimore? What do you fear is on Obama's progressive agenda for the rest of his term? Now, why do I ask that question? Because I'm about to play Mr. Obama's statement that he's going to squeeze. Well, listen to clip number 1 and you'll get the picture.
How am I going to spend whatever political capital that I've built up? You know, the list is long, and my instructions to my team and my instructions to myself have always been that we are going to squeeze every last ounce of progress that we can make as long as I have the privilege of holding this office.
It's not a privilege. It's a shame what you've done to this office. You have debased the White House. You have deflowered our liberties. I can go down the list, but then I'll blow my mood, and I don't want to do it. Do you see how evil this man is? No matter what he gets, he wants more. This is the mark of a Marxist. There's no enough for them. There's not enough progress. The definition of progress will only be determined when you are in chains, when you, the taxpayer, are actually in chains working for the illegal immigrant. Then they will have enough progress. Do you understand where this goes? Do you understand the sickness of the progressive? Do you understand why they have to be stopped? And do you understand why there's no stopping him and that only an act of God can stop this man? Lighten up, because only an act of God can save us from Barack Obama. There's no opposition party, no opposition press. The people have been nullified. And so here we are. We're sitting here in a petty dictatorship that's going to metastasize into something much worse. I can guarantee you. We have a phony White House. I can't begin. I'm livid. Yesterday, that nobody, Prime Minister of England, that fraud, Cameron, had the nerve to say that ISIS doesn't stand for Islam. Are you ready for this story? ISIS executed men, women, and children it found guilty of offenses against Islam, including 74 children executed who refused to fast for Ramadan. Now, Ramadan, so far as I know, is a fast related only to Islam. It's not related to Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism. The blood-soaked Nazi executioners of ISIS put 74 children and more women to death for such offenses as practicing magic and refusing to fast during Ramadan. And our president said nothing? Cameron said nothing? Can you understand what I'm saying to you? You know how guilty you are? You know how guilty you are of cooperating with ISIS by not speaking out against it to your friends, to anybody you can find, by shaking them and saying, do you know what the Nazi Islamists are doing? Do you understand you're living through a new Holocaust? Do you understand that if you lived through the 1930s and the Jews and Christians were being put into concentration camps, you would be another good German? Do you understand you're a good American? I know you can't stop Obama. I know you can't stop him because nobody can reach the man. He lives in his own twisted world. But you can change public opinion. How about all you good liberals in Manhattan right now listening to the show think this is all a joke? Why are you saying nothing? Why are you doing nothing? Why are you not raising money to stop them? Why are you still raising money for stupid things like global warming? What is wrong with you people? Are you that stupid? Have drugs gotten to your brain? Okay, that's all I can say on this. Children are being executed for not fasting during Ramadan, and we're supposed to be brainwashed and say this has nothing to do with Islam? The real blasphemy is the lie, the big lie that's being put out by all of the news networks. They're killing people for behavior seen as illegal based on the Quran. Burning people alive, firing squads, beatings, beheadings, drowning, explosions, throwing gays off roofs. The gays say nothing. They celebrate and party on with makeup and celebrate like that's the whole thing without saying, okay, we're liberated, now we're going to liberate these people. They do nothing for anybody. What can I say to you? Drowned in cages, having their head blown off with explosives, burning them alive in a car hit with a rocket launcher. It's a snuff group. ISIS is a worldwide snuff group. And until we get a leader who will stand up and say it like it is, you are in danger. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. I told you I was having a good time, but there's only so much you can take until you say, when is someone going to say something? All right, so here we are. we wake up, Pope in USA to meet with homeless prisoners and immigrants. Just as the secret hand selected Obama, adjusted the data, manipulated the coverage, picked and chose where the votes would come and go, they also picked the first non-European Pope in 1,200 years. We are witnessing the emergence of a worldwide Marxist dictatorship in the United States and the world. That's what you're actually watching. Now, you see, if you watch the pieces of it, you can get excited and yell and scream, but if you're not watching the entire locomotive, you don't know where the train is going. You're looking at individual cars. Oh, the Supreme Court did this. Oh, Obama did that. Oh, the Pope said this. Oh, de Blasio said that. Oh, this one said that. Oh, Hillary said this. Well, those are the cars of the train, but the big train is taking us down the drain. That's where it's going. So the question is, how did they get to compromise the justices? That's what people are asking. Intelligent people are asking the question, how could all of this come at us so quickly? It's impossible to believe. Let's put aside gay marriage. It's not the most important thing in the world. Put it aside for the minute. It's very important to families. It's very important to the religious. But the average person doesn't even care that much about it. But I will tell you what the average person cares about. What these sneaks did is far bigger than gay marriage. They said that states cannot require ID for federal elections. Do you have any idea how far-reaching that and how damaging that is? Have you been able to figure this out? And I ask those of you on the Democrat left side, how can you celebrate such a thing? Where in your learning did you determine that it's okay for non-citizens to vote in your country? How can that benefit you? What will they vote? Will they vote something of benefit to you or something of deficit to you? How can you think so twistedly? Is the schooling that bad that you would think in your own disinterest? You think in the interest of others instead of yourself? Why? Why would you do that? Who makes them so sacred? Why would you put their needs above those of the nation? But put the nation aside because you liberals don't believe there is a nation. You believe that there's a transnational situation. There should be no nation. You see, you're living in the fantasy, the same fantasy, by the way, that the EU had, which is that if they eliminated borders and eliminated nationalism, there would no longer be any wars. The Serbs wouldn't fight the Croatians. The French wouldn't fight the Germans. Nobody would fight with each other. The vision of the idiots, the communists and the perverts who are running the EU, the child molesters in Brussels, we'll talk about that another time. That was hushed up. They have a secret network of children that they use. You won't believe any of this because you didn't hear it from Brian Williams, so therefore it can't be true. The degenerates who run the EU had a vision, the same vision Obama has, which is that if you break borders and you destroy sovereignty of nations, all will be well around the world. People will get along. There'll be no conflict, and there'll be eternal prosperity. How'd that work out for Greece? Now, why is it that Greece is failing economically? Because they're a basket case economically. And as Margaret Thatcher famously said, socialism is a wonderful system until you run out of other people's money. Well, Greece ran out of other people's money. They were living on handouts from the rest of the EU, mainly the hardworking Germans. The Germans know what the Greeks were. The Greeks were not, they were never, ever, ever able to support themselves. They never should have been made a member of the European Union. And the only reason the Machiavellian leaders of the EU wanted Greece in so early without any reforms was to extend the hegemony of the EU and to threaten Russia, by the way, on its southern flank. You don't see any of this. It was always against Russia. That's all they have in their mind is anti-Russian sentiment. The whole EU was created with one goal in mind, which was to encircle and threaten Russia. So you wonder why Putin is reacting. You know, for every action, there is an equal opposite reaction. So you threaten Russia. You bring Greece into the EU. You bring Ukraine into the EU. You put troops on the border of Russia. What do you expect Putin to do? Roll over? He's not going to roll over. The Russians would rather eat pine bark in a war against the West. You don't know who the grandsons of Stalingrad are. You people have no idea. You have no idea what the Russian spirit is made of. I pray to God that this idiot sorority of ours that's running America does not make the mistake of putting our troops in harm's way against the Russians. Not only would it be a disaster for all concerned, they would decimate us. They decimate us for many reasons. And yet these idiots surrounding Obama gleefully talk about putting troops on the border of Russia. But I'm getting a little far afield, am I not? Let's bring it down home and let's keep it simple. Gay marriage. Then they threw us a bone. They said you could use coal, or you right-wingers, you like coal. I personally don't know coal. I don't know anyone in the coal business. I guess you would think that I know someone in the coal business. I don't even like coal particularly. I know you can turn coal into diamonds. I like that part about coal. I don't have a coal-fired furnace. I have no money in coal stocks, but I guess they assume anyone who is in favor of using coal in power plants owns coal stocks. Well, I can tell you right now, I don't own any coal stocks. Then they said the justices, the perverted justices, or the compromised justices, what I mean. The compromised Supreme said you can use the injection for prisoners on death row, that it's not a bad injection. It doesn't constitute cruel and unusual punishment, so you're allowed to kill them. Death penalty is okay. They threw us that bone. They figured, okay, gay marriage, we drove them insane with that. Obamacare drove them insane with that. Too much in 1 week. All right, throw them coal, throw them the needle. They'll calm down, the right-wing nuts. The next minute, they tell you have no right to voter ID because Obama was willing to capitulate to big business because that's who he's there for anyway. I mean, what are you kidding me? You think he's a leftist? Obama's not a leftist. He's a Machiavellian out for himself. I'll be right back.
Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. Here we go. The world comes tumbling down. Islamist opens up with a machine gun. Another one cuts the head off a factory owner in France. No reportage, though. Hardly any. Can't find it on Martha Washington's show. She was all happy about covering the whole rainbow thing. What's this about? How do the people live with this? How do they handle it? What do you mean? They're partying on here, dancing. Meanwhile, the world is on fire because of Obama. He set the world on fire. Unleashed the Islamists by not controlling them. By precipitously removing troops from Iraq, he permitted Saddam Hussein's ex-military chiefs to go on a rampage. That's it in a nutshell if you don't know what's going on. These are the Sunni madmen who were working for Saddam Hussein in his Praetorian Guard. That's who's running this military right now called ISIS, along with the lunatics from around the world, that kind, the religious fanatics who think they're going to bring back a purity when they're going to just bring back Hitler. That's what they're doing anyway. And meanwhile, we wake up in Greece. We know Greece was a basket case. We knew Ireland's a basket case. We know Portugal's a basket case. We know Spain is a basket case. We know America's not too far behind. We all know it's funny money. We all know Obama's printing it as fast as the paper can be cut down from the trees in order to fund the welfare state. And then we read that Puerto Rico says they can't pay their debt. You look into the Puerto Rico thing, your hair will stand up. 60% of Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico are on government assistance. 20% of the GDP is medical care. You tell me there's no crime there? The whole medical system is a criminal operation. You think Obamacare is not going to be riddled with a criminal enterprise? It's all a criminal enterprise from top to bottom. A $30 aspirin, where do you think the money goes? But anyway, with the ambulances, who do you think owns the ambulance companies? So 20% of the GDP in Puerto Rico is Medicare, is medical. 60% of them are on welfare. So no wonder they're not going to pay their debt. So I send this thing about Puerto Rico to my good friend Craig Smith, who's been a sponsor of my show from the beginning with Swiss America, as you well know. And he says, Greece is first to collapse and leave the EU. Second on list of international debt crisis is Puerto Rico. He said there could be a cascade of Portugal, Italy, Ireland, and Spain to follow. The debt is far too high, and the chickens have finally come home to roost. Each of the last 3 books Swiss America has offered on your show warned against all of this. I said, wow, I'm glad I bought gold. I hope my listeners hedge their bets and buy some. You know, each of them buy a little gold, for God's sakes. They got to be nuts not to. You got to be crazy. What's going to happen if they close your ATMs? What would you do if you woke up one day and your ATM was closed? How would you live? What would you live on? The Dow plunged 300 points today. Why did Greece collapse? Because they were living on borrowed money. They were lazy bums. They didn't want to work. They wanted to walk around, go on vacations to Italy, go to Italy and France, San Francisco, sit and drink Chardonnay in a cafe on a government dole, 10-week vacations, maternity care, fraternity care, paternity care, whatever. The government pays for it. Government pays for it. So what Obama is doing here is bringing about the socialism of Europe to America. And we're not too far behind all of them. We all know that. Everyone knows that. All of the so-called experts who did this to it telling us it's going to happen. It's like the intelligence community. I love that. All the intelligence communities saying, oh, we're going to have an attack, likely in a high level of fear for July 4th. All the geniuses, CIA, DEI, ABC, NBC, DEA, DHS, MSNBC, all one and the same. Oh, high likelihood of a terrorist attack. Well, why don't you preemptively arrest the Islamists you've been following since 2005, doofus? What, you got to follow due process until someone's dead? Don't give me that crap. You're like the firemen who want fires to start to justify the firehouse budget, is how I see it. So you know you're not going to be touched. You're armed to the teeth with machine guns and armored personnel carriers, so you're not afraid of them. Let a few of us go down in flames so you can justify a bigger budget for more intelligence doofuses. Big likelihood of an attack July 4th. Oh, yeah, Dianne Feinstein, another great genius. Senate Intelligence Committee, that's a laugh. How'd she inveigle her way onto that? Well, how and why? Simple, follow the money. You're on the Intelligence Committee, you got all the intelligence about where the contracts are. Not a laughing matter, but that's how it works in Rome.
Savage.
We're all reeling from this disaster, the series of murders in South Carolina. We're asking who's to blame, and we're looking for leadership. We have no leadership. We have nowhere to turn. Not one Republican has stepped up. And I suggested the president, instead of blaming guns, should have said anyone who crosses state lines will be arrested under the Anti-Riot Act. You're not going into South Carolina to stir up a riot. That's what should have been done, but I haven't heard it. Well, we have a leader on the line right now, someone that I would vote for in a heartbeat, someone I would support right from the get-go, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump, welcome to the Savage Nation. I'm glad you're with us.
Hello, Michael.
It is a sad day, is it not? 9 beautiful people executed in a church?
Terrible. By a maniac, by a young man that is just an absolute sick, demented person. It's a very sad thing, Michael. It's a very sad thing.
Donald, look, let's talk about the election. That's what this is all about. You know me. I'm straightforward, and I'm not trying to set you up, but people have called the show since you announced, and I support you from the get-go. But many people are saying, well, look, how do you know he's real? How do you know he's not going to split the Republican vote by running as a third-party candidate, pulling a Ross Perot? Would you answer that question? Do you think it's a fair fear?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm real, and I'm very serious about it, Michael. I think our country is run by incompetent people. We have an incompetent president who truly doesn't have a clue. I don't think he has a clue. You know, a lot of people think he's a bad person. I don't know if he's good or bad. I can tell you what he is. He's incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. And, you know, you look at Sergeant Bergdahl, where we get Bergdahl, the traitor, we get Bergdahl, they get 5 killers that are out there on the field now trying to kill everybody. And, you know, this is the way we would negotiate. This is the way he negotiates. The Iran deal is a disaster. The trade deals are all a disaster. Every country is beating us in trade. And believe me, if I win, that won't happen. That will not be happening, that I can tell you.
Well, let me ask you this. Given the antipathy of the Republican establishment to your candidacy because they're afraid by your simple, plain, honest truths and what needs to be done, would you consider running on a third-party ticket? And you know what that would do. That would elect Hillary, wouldn't it?
Sure. I'm never writing anything off. I'm running as a Republican. I am a Republican. I'm a conservative.
Okay. Well, you said it right now. You said I'm running as a Republican. That's really what I said. I said he's not going to split the ticket.
Yeah. I'm running as a Republican. I want to go all the way. I don't like a lot of these people. It's not even like I don't respect some of these people. They shouldn't be running for office. They have no right to run for office.
Donald, you know that the best and the brightest generally don't go into politics, you being the exception. And you said years ago, run the country like a business, not like, God knows what it is, a welfare state. Right. You and I both agree there should be tariffs on Chinese goods. Don't you agree?
They're tariffing our goods. They're putting tariffs and taxes on our goods, and we talk about free trade. You know, the problem with free trade is you need to speak to smart people to negotiate for. I don't mind. I love free trade. I'm a free trader. But China's not a free trader. They're killing us. You know, when Boeing sells planes to China, they take all the secrets of Boeing. That's part of the deal. You're going to have to give us all your patents, all your secrets. You're going to have to give us everything. I mean, it's brutal you do business with them. I have a friend that tries to get stuff into China. He can't get it in. Finally, he gets it in, and they charge him tax. And yet we think they're so wonderful. And, you know, they put out a statement about me from the Chinese embassy. I was very proud of that, of course. But they put out a statement that Mr. Trump is wrong. Essentially, Mr. Trump is wrong. We have a wonderful partnership with the United States. Partnership. Well, of course they love it. I love it, too, when we have stupid partners that don't know what they're doing. You know,
sure, like the battery maker A123 Systems, which was given $133 million in federal taxes and whatnot, tax credits and grants. They went bankrupt. The company was then bought by a Chinese company, and now they're making a profit and not going to pay back the federal government. What a deal they got, hey, Donald?
We are incompetent. You know, the people that we have we have great people. We have Henry Kravis and Carl Icahn, and you know, I could name 100 guys. I could also name guys that have big names that aren't very good. You know, they're overrated. But I know the good ones, you know, the bad ones. I could put people in charge of China. China doesn't have a chance. I could put people in charge of Japan. You know, Japan sends in millions of cars over the years, millions. When was the last time you see a Chevrolet in Tokyo? Do you think there's any Chevrolet in Tokyo? Maybe the two. You know, how many Chevrolets do you think we have driving around in the street?
No, Donald, I see the ships coming in San Francisco Bay every day. My heart breaks. I see these ships laden with foreign cars, and I don't understand why there's no tariffs on them.
Well, how about this? Ford goes out and announces they're going to build a $2.5 billion plant in Mexico, right smack in the middle of Mexico. They're going to, and you know what they're going to do with the plant? They're going to make cars and parts and trucks and stuff. They're going to send them to the United States, no tax. Now, explain to me, because I'm sort of a natural business. I built a great company. You see that because I released my financials, and everyone's sort of shocked. They had no idea.
Right.
They were hoping that they wouldn't be so good, and they were
hoping you were broke and that you owed more money than you earned. I know that's what they were hoping. They were disappointed, weren't they?
Right. Oh well, they were shocked because I'm a private company. They didn't know, so they were thinking it was $2 billion or $1 billion or nothing, or maybe I was worth nothing, and it turned out to be $9 billion, and much higher than that. It will be much higher than that, but $9 billion. And by the way, very little debt. Unbelievable. So they were shocked. You know, they're going, wow, that we had no idea. Because, again, as a private company, these magazines and all, who treat me fine, but they don't know what. And I'm not doing that as a braggadocious thing. I'm just saying I know what I'm doing. I would not let Mexico get away with it. I would tell Ford, you're going to pay a 35% tax every time you make a car and send it in. Because what are they doing? When they make cars in Mexico, that means we're not making that car in the United States. It's very simple. And that means we're not employing our people. Do you know how many companies have gone to Mexico to build? I mean, you look at New England, the place was a ghost town. So, look, we need, and I love Mexico. I love the Mexican people. I have a lot of relationships with them. But they know they're getting away with murder. It's like China. China's the number one abuser, though. What they do with their currency manipulation is incredible. And our people are so stupid, they don't even cover it in trade pacts.
Donald, when you announced this week, I watched the little people, the Lilliputians, attack you. You know what I called them? I said they're toe dust compared to him. I saw these little men and little women trying to rip you apart, and I said they are toe dust. That's all they are. They're jealous of this man, and there's a lot of jealousy for successful people in this country, as you well know, Donald. Who would you pick as a VP candidate?
Well, before I say that, you have like a guy like George Will. His hatred for me is unbelievable. What he doesn't tell you, you take his glasses off and he doesn't look like a smart guy anymore, right? But
let's call him toe dust in a bad suit.
Right, I have a place, Mar-a-Lago, and he was there about 12 years ago. He made a speech. I didn't go to it because I find him very boring, and he's actually wrong on many things. He was wrong on Iraq and wrong on plenty of things. But the hatred this guy has, I said, wow, I probably should have gone, but he was just, I just didn't want to go. And it was years ago, but he never forgot. And that's the only reason. He hits me, and they do hit me.
Why? What, he didn't like that you didn't go to his speech at Mar-a-Lago?
Absolutely. He was very upset about it. He was very, very upset about it. But
wow.
I have other things to do, and I couldn't go to his speech, and he never forgot it, and he hits me. And that's the way these guys... By the way, his speech was terrible. I had a friend that went there. They said it was terrible. So I didn't do anything.
Donald, a guy like George Will, his time is gone a long time ago. He's irrelevant. No one reads him. But the issue is you. You're running. You're real. You don't really want to run as a third-party candidate. You say you're a Republican, even though they have a great fear of you. Would you be willing to consider a great man such as Ben Carson as a VP candidate, or is it too soon to ask that question?
Michael, it's too soon to talk. I like Ben Carson. He's a nice guy. I know him. I've actually seen him at some of my places, and he's really a nice guy. He's got a very nice wife. I met them both, and they're nice people. But even Ben Carson, it's like he doesn't have the experience to run something like that. He's a surgeon, and it's different. It's not.
So you say you need someone with a killer instinct like you.
We need a killer who's smart and not a killer. I know a lot of
Well, no, I say that in a sports context. I grew up watching boxing matches, as I'm sure you do, because you have them in your hotels. And I was told since I'm a child by my father, the reason one man beats another, he said, Michael, watch that fight. The guy with the killer instinct usually wins. I never understood it till I got older and got punched a few times to understand what the killer instinct meant. Donald, you and I see the world the same way. You know, when I supported you the other day on this show, I was shocked that that low-life writer at the National Review, whose name I don't remember, wrote such a horrible thing about you and said that your father gave you your empire, gave you your money, and he was a slumlord. That is such crap. I happen to know that your father built some of the finest middle-class apartment blocks in New York, both in Brooklyn and Queens. I know it for a fact because one of my relatives lived in them. They were beautiful buildings. Why do they do such things?
Well, because, you know, the National Review's going out of business, in my opinion. I think it's doing very badly. William F. Buckley, I knew him. He was great. I was a young guy. He was a much older guy, but he was a great guy. And, and he must be spinning in his grave. They have a bunch of lowlifes over there.
Well, they've attacked me for years, and I understand that they're run by these Lilliputians, but it's one thing to not like someone. It's another thing to outright lie and say your father was a slumlord. I took offense at that, and he wasn't my father.
Well, you know what? My father was a terrific guy, and he built middle-income housing and low-income housing, and he did a great job for a lot of people, and he was a really good person, and he taught me a lot. And frankly, he did me a favor because he didn't want me to go to Manhattan, and he never went to Manhattan. And I said, Pop, I want to go to Manhattan. I want to build those big buildings. He said, son, that's not our league. We don't want to do that. It's not our league. And I went. And, you know, that was another thing. I guess I can add that to the book. Look, our country is in serious, serious trouble. And, you know, my theme is very simple. Make America great again. We can make it great. We've got to take back our jobs from China. And I don't even mean all of them. We have to take back some of this stuff that's going on. You can't buy. If you want to buy a television, I just ordered 4,000 televisions for a big project I'm doing someplace. And I order televisions all the time. I have Doral in Miami. I've always, you know where they come from? South Korea. Sanyo, you have this, that. They're all South Korea. And I'm saying to myself, wouldn't it be nice if we made televisions? I actually tell my people, is there a company that makes televisions in the United States? Get the bids, and they're all from South Korea. Now, when South Korea has a problem, they're making a fortune off us, right? When South Korea has a problem with North Korea, where the guy starts rearing his head and he wants to, starts throwing around the nuke word and everything else, we immediately send our ships over. We get nothing. They don't pay us anything. Anything.
We get nothing. We don't get a jar of kimchi from them in exchange.
Hey, Michael, Saudi Arabia makes $1 billion a day. $1 billion a day. Think of it. $1 billion a day.
Donald, what do you have to say to the millions of people who listen to the show and hear you as a leader who does not blame the American people for what's going on, but blame an incompetent, divisive government for what's going on?
I'm serious about this. I'm giving up a lot by doing it. These politicians give up nothing. They're all talk. They're no action. They're never going to bring us to the promised land. They don't know what they're doing. And we're in a bubble. We're going to have a problem like you've never seen before. We have to take our jobs back from China. We have to take our jobs back from Mexico and all the other places that are just ripping us. So I'll do it, and they understand I'll do it. The other side knows. I deal with them all the time. I beat them all the time.
Mexico is now deporting more illegal aliens than the United States. I love your idea of the Great Wall. Donald Trump, thank you so much, and good luck. I hope you do run. This is the Savage Nation.
Savage.
Hey, our Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. The only company I trust for wealth insurance, gold and silver. Call 800-BUICOIN. Hey, Mike, yes, Savage.
Whatever political capital that I built up, the list is long, and my instructions to my team and my instructions to myself have always been that we are going to squeeze every last ounce of progress that we can make as long as I have the privilege of holding this office.
Well, Cuban music to celebrate the dance of the devils. The Castro brothers finally getting what they've always wanted, which is locking up all their opponents in the hellholes of their prisons and being rewarded for it by Barack Frankenstein Obama. He's going to squeeze every last ounce of progress out of the office while he's still there. Listen, here are some of the items that are still on his list. Giving Iran nuclear weapons. He's calling it an Iran nuclear deal. A major infrastructure spending bill, which means giving the unions trillions of dollars in building funds for the highways. Reforming the criminal justice system, which means let everyone out of prison who can threaten the middle class. 2 years of free community college, which means give dummies access to community college so they can wreck the university system. Other items on Frankenstein's list includes closing the prison at Guantanamo Bay and giving back that part of Cuba to the Cuban people. That would be fair. Renewing the Export-Import Bank. A new major cybersecurity bill, which means he can spy on kindergartners playing with fake iPhones. Paid sick leave. The man doesn't know what he's doing. Do you understand? He doesn't even know what's happening in Greece and what it portends for this nation. Does he not understand someone has to pay for all of these stupid socialist programs that he and his Girl Scouts are trying to impose upon us? Okay, it's summer. I said I wouldn't do the news, but there's only so much you can take until you say, how can you take it anymore? It's a nation of cowards with no opposition. The world is burning. ISIS is kidnapping, raping, murdering, shooting children, raping children. He says nothing, Frankenstein Obama, nothing. Instead, he celebrates gay marriage. Where are the gays? I want to know where the great men of conscience are. All of the gay men who are celebrating gay marriage. Why do they say nothing about ISIS? Where are they, these great social progressives? Answer, nowhere. Where are the great lesbians of our time? Why are they not speaking about the kidnapping and rape of children and women by ISIS? Why? Where are they? Nowhere. Riding motorcycles in San Francisco, expressing their freedom. Unbelievable to me. Look who are the people of conscience today. I want to show you how reversed everything is. We, the conservatives, are the people of conscience. We are the only ones speaking out about what ISIS is doing, while the so-called progressive liberals say nothing. So answer me, who are the people of conscience? We are. They're not the people of conscience. They don't care about anybody or anything except their own pleasure, their own self-interest. Do you understand what I'm saying? Everything has been upside down. Yesterday I talked about the corruption of language itself. We, the conservatives, are actually the liberals of our time. And the liberals of today are the fascists of our time. Do you understand how they've controlled the language? How they switched everything on you? We're talking about liberation. They're talking about the imprisonment of anyone who opposes them. Some of them are even saying you should execute anyone who opposes the theory of global warming. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? We're entering a new dark age under Obama. 100 years of darkness under Obama after he leaves office. It'll be almost impossible to reverse it when he packs the court with these psychopath leftists. Okay, so I started by talking about savagisms from the history of the savage nation going back 21 years. I am a national treasure. If I were not who I am, I'd be celebrated all over the country. There'd be statues to me if the country was run by patriots instead of being run by the opposition to Borders, Language, and Culture, the Spielbergs, Katzenberg, Hatzenbergs, Matzenbergs, the Geffens, all of the America haters, the twisted sisters of America who have poisoned the culture, destroyed the mind of America with the pollution that they put out called movies. No one watches more movies than I do, but I'm very selective in what I choose to watch. And I am telling you, the sickness that emanates out of these minds is overwhelming. And you wonder why the radical Muslims are on the warpath. I'm not talking about ISIS. I'm talking about even a conservative Muslim living in the country who wants nothing to do with ISIS. You ask them why they hate America. They don't want to see ISIS here. They just want to see the pollution stop.
Savage means adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
News is so horrible that I'm not going to do the news. Look, I saw a story that I was going to lead the show with. Mayor Kami de Blasio signs a Fair Chance Act, which would make it a violation of the New York City human rights law for any employer to make any inquiry or statement about an applicant's pending arrest record or criminal background prior to an applicant receiving a conditional offer of employment. What does that mean? Well, it means that you could hire someone with a DUI to drive a school bus. You can hire a perv to be a teacher. You know, stuff like that, something commies would like. But I said, you know what, there's only so much people can take. If de Blasio is not going to allow employers to ask for criminal records, you're going to have to hire criminals. I said, that's a story that I can deal with. Then I said, you know what, hey, it's summertime, and the living is supposed to be easy despite the fact that we have a crazy man in the White House who is so mad to destroy the country that he says today that he's going to squeeze every last ounce of progress we can make as long as I hold this office. I said, you want to eat your heart out? Talk about the madman. Because the only thing that's going to stop this madman is God himself. It is literally going to take an act of God to stop this lunatic. There's no opposition party. He owns the media. The people have been deballed. There's nothing to stop him from imposing the mad agenda of the communist left. So I said, I'm not going to eat my heart out over that either. Maybe God will intervene and stop him in some way. I don't know how. So I said, you know what I'm going to do instead? So I start to read. I like to read blogs. If I read a news article, I'm one of the few people who actually read bloggers. I like to see what people say because graffiti has always been the voice of the people, whether you know it or not. There's actually a long tradition in human history of people who like write dirty things in bathrooms. But if you read some of them, they're very funny going back to grade school. I mean, some of it was ludicrous and stupid and adolescent and idiotic and perverse. But some of it was funny, right? Robert, right or wrong, right? Some of it was funny. Graffiti has long known to represent the voice of the people in some ways. Certainly it doesn't represent the liars in the media or the liars in Hollywood or the liars in Congress. So I read the graffiti called bloggers, and I start to see my own statements being repeated without any alliteration to me, such as when the chrome was thick and the women were straight, without saying Michael Savage created it. I said, that's good. I'm entering the American mind. So I said, wait a minute, why don't I get the glossary of savagisms going back over the years and ask the audience in the new Obama era of fascism, communism, socialism, and the big lie, where everything that is a lie is held up as the truth and all the truth is held up as lies. Why don't you go back from some of your Savage Speak glossary of savagisms and ask the audience which one of these phrases should be dropped from my glossary as politically offensive in some way. So let me go back to my glossary. Baggy-eyed Bolshevik, I call Jim Lehrer that. That's when he was once a moderator. Remember Baggy-eyed Bolshevik? That's what he always has been. Briefcase mafia trial lawyers. Bypassed Bolsheviks and Buicks would be retired, retreated leftists known to haunt Palm Beach County, Florida. Caesars of Hollywood. Actors and actresses who move among us as if they were gods. Christophobia. The loathing and hatred of Christianity by bigoted, intolerant, secular leftists. Clipped hair, mean-faced women. That defines what? Self-evident. Compassionate conservative, Michael Savage. Condo commies, wealthy socialists. Corned beef commies, unhealthy, wealthy socialists. Crack pants, pants worn by skinny middle-class kids who emulate gangbangers. Crescent News Network, CNN. The Tsarina of Education, the clipped hair, mean-faced women who dominate the National Miseducation Association and control it with a jackboot. Demokins, Republicans who act like Democrats. That would be all of them. Demon cats are a euphemistic term for godless Democrats. The Dodge City of Talk Radio, the Savage Nation. Empty skirt, a pancake-faced teleprompter-reading leg crosser on Fox News. EPA, Environmental Propaganda Agency. From the Boulder Dam to dental dams. From Boulder Dam to dental dams in one generation. And the definition is from historic feats of engineering to corrupted acts of fellation. This is funny. I got to tell you, I'm enjoying it. You know, the only way to test whether your writing is still good is to read it yourself cold and see if it still makes you laugh. That's funny. Okay. From kid gloves, some of this is maybe borderline. I don't know if I can even read this on the air. From kid gloves to latex gloves. From kid gloves to latex gloves in one generation. I cannot read the definition. From St. Christopher's medals to crystals in one generation. That's going from traditional faith to New Age cosmic flakes. The Grim Reefer Gang, advocates for medical marijuana. The government media complex, unholy alliance between big government and media elites. Head cutters and headscarves. Evangelists who spread the religion of peace by cutting people to pieces. Hieroglyphics set to a beat, rap. Reverend Jesse I. Jackson, the pastor of the First Rainbow Church of Shakedowns. Hitler in a dirty nightshirt. Osama bin Laden, he's dead. Hollywood idiots, mindless thespians from the land of make-believe. Houses of porn and scorn, today's liberal colleges. Illiberal, what liberal used to mean. Infidels, the savage listening audience. Institute of Lower Living, colleges where junior sheeple can get the finest illiberal education that taxpayer money can buy. Islamofascists, dirty nightshirt-clad radical Muslims who walk with the Quran in one hand and a bloody rusty knife in the other. Knee-jerk conservatives, reflexive right-wingers who never ask why when conservative leaders say drink the Kool-Aid. Lexus liberals, Kerry brand liberals who despise the nation that made their wealth. That's good. Lunchroom Lenins, found mainly in southern Florida at early bird buffets. Madeline Halfbright, former Secretary of Hate under Bill Clinton, who in my day would have run a deli on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Mayor Any Newsom, ex-San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom, who violated California state law by issuing thousands of gay marriage licenses. Well, today he's a demigod. He was ahead of his time. Mind sluts, news chicks who prostitute their ethics to espouse the party line. Mushroom Boys, L.A. screenwriters. Ninth Jerk at Court of Schlemiels, can't say it without it. Nostrilman, Henry Waxman, remember him? The guy with the big nostrils? Old York Times, the once great lady deflowered by Pinchy Sulzberger's juvenile worldview. PBS, Palestine Broadcasting System. Pinchy Sulzberger, the left-leaning czar of the Old York Times and son of Arthur H. Sulzberger. Pot in every chicken, legalization of marijuana. Psychological nudity, exposing the savage truth. Rat Boy, John Walker Lynn, the so-called American Taliban who stabbed America in the back. He's still in the can, by the way. Republicrats, turncoat Republicans, John McCain and other left-leaning anti-conservatives. I wrote these in 2000, by the way. Here's a good one. Many of you remember this. If you remember this, will you raise your left hand? Red Diaper Dopa Babies, RDDBs, psychotic 60s leftovers who mix too much Marx with their marijuana. Savagettes, the babes of the savage nation, of which there are 12. Sheeple, the unthinking gullible masses. Shiocracy, the reigning rule of radical feminism that emasculated America's men. Socialism, organized crime with an army. Spawning like shrimp. See, now this is a bad one. This could get me into a state of Donald Trump. Spawning like shrimp. I can't mention what the definition is. Stand-up Stalins. Those would be anti-American comedians such as Bill Maher, a big phony through and through, a man who doesn't have a piece of red blood in his body. The stench from the bench is making me clench. That's the odorous rule of liberal judges. The Supremes. That's the U.S. Supreme Court justices. TNN, Taliban News Network, also known as CNN, trickle-down immorality, as perfected by Bill Clinton, the course material in the majority of America's public schools. And finally, Yentertainers, gossipy, meddlesome, clueless female performers a la Barbara Streisand or Barbara Boxer. Now, every day the same thing. You want me to talk about the Confederate flag? Hey, Mike, talk about the Confederate flag. Hey, Mike, be like those other talk show hosts. Talk about the... Come on, man. You heard it already today that you're going to hear all day long from the copycat Yentas who follow him. What do you want from me? He writes the script and they read the tune the rest of the day. I write my own script. That's all. It's original. Lighten up. Lighten up, because only an act of God can save us from Barack Obama. The people have been nullified. I found two more. Russia and China have no estate tax. Obama is to the left of Putin and China on taxation. How do you like that one? Here's another savagism that'll outlive me. If you're pessimistic long enough, you'll never be disappointed. Not bad, Mike. Back in 2000, I published a book called The Savage Nation. I'm not trying to sell you a book. If you want to buy a book of mine for the weekend, you can buy Countdown to Mecca. But I go back and I look at how prescient I am. And I talk about Al Gore had he won the election in 2000. Remember they were playing with punch cards, hanging chads. Remember that? And I say, what would have happened if Al Gore had won? And I looked at it and I said, oh, my God. Let's go back to 2002, where I say, what would happen if Al Gore had won? And let's see how many of these things that I predicted might happen, sarcastically in some regard, under Obama. One, homosexuals in the military and homosexual marriage. I swear to God. I said that would happen if Al Gore won. So check that off. The agenda item. Number two, affirmative action, or the Fairness for Dummies Act. 3, reparations for non-slaves by non-slaveholders. 4, hate crime laws aimed at straight white males. 5, racial profiling laws aimed at straight white police. 6, a United Nations tax or a world tax. That's coming, by the way, after the Pope's visit. 7, free prescription drugs, not only for the elderly, but also for AIDS patients. That's a reality, right? 8, delegitimizing the Boy Scouts or the Fairness to Predators Act. It's happening, man. I said it would happen. 9, outlawing homeschooling or the Freedom from Learning Act. Here it comes. Look at number 10. Arrest, ban, or rewrite the authentic Bible as a hate book. Now, who is the prophet of talk radio? Me. I'll be right back.
Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. You know, July 4th is tomorrow, and I want you to understand that one of the most exciting books out there is called Countdown to Mecca. It's a runaway bestseller. It's by me. It's about terrorism. It's about U.S. generals plotting a terrible, terrible thing to do with Mecca, and how my hero Jack Hatfield races to stop them. It's got history, it's got politics, it's conservative, it's full of testosterone. If you want to drive your testosterone, read Countdown to Mecca. You can buy it in any bookstore or on Amazon.com. Now listen to an excerpt from it. Prologue, St. Petersburg, Russia, Aeroport Pulkovo. You'll notice all the settings, those of you who know anything, are carefully researched. Everything in my books are all of these things are carefully researched. Pyotr Ansky's pale eyes were dead as he walked through Terminal 2 toward his flight. He saw everyone without empathy or interest. It had been that way since his first assignment years before. Passing through the last of 3 security checkpoints, Ansky glanced uncaring at 2 middle-aged transportation officers, his face like that of any distracted, put-upon 30-something traveler. That was his disguise this day. Pulling on his shoes at the end of the security line, Pyotr imagined himself to be what his visa said he was, a computer contractor headed for a programming job in Jordan. Pyotr made his way through security without incident. Russia Airlines was just proud of its aviation security program, which found no weapons or contraband on him or in his backpack during his third and final search prior to boarding. He smiled as he found his seat at the rear of the cabin. Pyotr allowed himself a sliver of satisfaction as he appeared to stretch before sitting. He was not just an assassin. There were plenty of those on the international market. He was one of a unique breed, a professional comedian doing a consummate infiltration. There was no time to savor his successful boarding. Pyotr went to the lavatory where he reviewed the next scene of operations. The 737-500 had a cruising speed, 800 clicks an hour. Maximum flight altitude was 12,300 meters. Seating capacity was 117. He mentally reviewed the layout, the exits, the cockpit configuration. He emerged and looked around. The flight was not full, but Pyotr noted every face on board. Intense young businessmen, older businessmen drunk from the airport bar, a family with an 8-year-old, women in burqas accompanied by their husbands or brothers. Pyotr did that for every single face of the 94 people on board before deciding who the Russian security agent was. Pyotr had no doubt there would be a plainclothes undercover operative. This was, after all, a flight to Amman, Jordan. Islamic terrorism had long been considered a major threat to the security of Russia, both before and after the Soviet era. 4 things would mark him. He would have a sport coat to cover his weapon. He would possess a penetrating stare as he analyzed passengers for potential threats. He'd be middle-aged, retired from the military, but with enough bulk to suggest he'd once been athletic. And he would be a man. There was only one woman in the force, and Pyotr already knew she was assigned to flights originating to Moscow and New York. Ahead aisle seat, row 16, aisle seat economy class, near the exit door. He saw the shadow of a shoulder holster as the agent leaned forward. The man sat alone. That would make things easier. Satisfied, Pyotr Ansky fell into a seat, but did not relax after takeoff. As the aircraft started over the Black Sea 1,000 miles from Pulkovo, the co-pilot emerged to use the bathroom. Pyotr knew that was coming. The man had used the lavatory when he boarded to put a full bottle of Putinka vodka in the trash. Many Russian pilots, also former military aviators, had a drinking problem. I'll stop right there. Those are the first 2 pages of Countdown to Mecca. In my great novel, Countdown to Mecca, there's a plot where a group of U.S. generals plot to blow up Mecca during the Hajj, thinking they'll take out the most radical members of Islam. Well, my hero, Jack Hatfield, knows that that's a disastrous mistake, and that if they did that, they would radicalize all of Islam. And so my book is the opposite of what the liberals have said it is, and that's why the New York Times banned it from the bestseller list, even though the book beat 5 books in count of numbers sold. They made believe it didn't exist. So the book is about Jack Hatfield stopping the attack. And the generals, one of the greatest segments of the novel is where the generals meet and discuss why they want to blow up Mecca. It's one of the most interesting passages. It's a political thriller, and I really recommend you read it for July 4th if you haven't gotten it yet. Coming out of the Pope's office on global warming, amongst other areas of question. And we learned something shocking. We learned that the so-called scientist who advises Pope Francis is a pantheist who believes in Gaia, not in God. We read Pope Francis's recent encyclical on global warming, but you didn't know that the chief, quote, scientist who advised the Pope on this major document is an atheist. According to our guest, Dr. William Briggs, Hans Schellnhuber is a devout believer in the Gaia principle, which states that, quote, all life interacts with the earth and the earth with all life to form a giant, self-regulating living system. The earth knows man and his activities and frankly isn't too happy with him. Well, I can agree with that. It doesn't mean that we have to now throw God out with the bathwater, do we? I'm a natural scientist, and I certainly see the divinity in an ant. No one has to teach me that. But we don't have to throw God out to believe that there's a divinity in all things living. What's important here, though, is that we listen to our guest, Dr. William Briggs, about the scientific pantheist who advises Pope Francis. Dr. Briggs, a pleasure to have a man of intelligence on the program. Thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So who is this Hans Schellnhuber? What is his background?
Yeah, he's a quantum physicist originally, but he saw his opportunity to jump into the political arena with climate change and did so with gusto. He's the guy who came up with all these ideas of tipping points you might have heard of. Tipping these periods of time which, if we don't do something by the time it happens, the world will be doomed. They keep issuing these tipping points. They keep predicting, well, if we don't do something by 2006, we're going to be doomed. If we don't do something by 2007, we're going to be doomed, and so forth.
I see. Yeah, we've heard that over the last few years. I think, according to Al Gore, we should all be underwater by now. I believe that there'd be polar bears floating in our living rooms by now if we believed Al Gore 10 years ago. What about this, Dr. Briggs? This is the shocking part. Apparently, the Pontifical Academies of Science locked out of the encyclical process any scientists who do not believe in the existence of global warming. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. Archbishop Sanchez Sarando had a conference back in April at the Pontifical Academy of Science, at which only those who believed in global warming theory of doom were invited. Hans Schellnhuber, he was one of those guys, and he openly has bragged about keeping skeptical scientists like myself and others away from the Vatican so that no dissension could be heard. And so
that sounds like the doesn't that sound like the golden age of the pontiff and the age of Galileo?
This is a terrible danger we're risking here. I mean, they've advised the Pope so badly on these things. Unfortunately, it's led him to write things in the encyclical that aren't true. For instance, the Pope says the temperature has been increasing. Well, that's not true. For the past almost 2 decades now, the temperature, it's meandered around a little bit, it's true, but it has not increased. Yet the models, the predictions, have said the temperature should be increasing some more. The discrepancy between what is modeled, the theory, and reality grows ever and ever larger. And now it used to be a fundamental principle of science that when a model did so badly, you knew that the theory which underlay the model was false. Every scientist used to know this. But now people are scared to come out and say this simple scientific fact. And they're scared to say it because they're attacked or they're locked out, like Schellnhuber has done with the Pontifical Academy.
Yeah, but this is the church going backwards to the medieval times, where anyone who didn't believe in their theories was considered apostate and was excommunicated or assassinated. This is a retrograde throwback era in the history of the church. It's astounding to me that they get away with it. But I want to make it simple for my audience, Dr. Briggs, which is this. One of the first rules that you teach young children when you're teaching them science, even in the high school level, is that in science there are no absolutes, meaning there's no such thing as all the scientists agree or that all the truth is in. Science is an emerging subject. Whatever the subject may be, we're always open to new discoveries or new evidence, aren't we?
That is absolutely 100% true. Not only that, there is no such thing as this false and faulty so-called consensus that 97% of scientists agree that man-made global warming is dangerous. This is false. This is not true at all. We have a paper showing this is not the case. They do some funny statistics and bad counting and all this kind of... If you go and talk to people in the field, nobody believes this kind of stuff, or hardly anybody. There's only a few dozen people who keep this sort of lock on the political situation, on the scientific situation, and you can't break it. I can ask your audience now. Any scientist is listening to this. You tell me the models have been so bad, so atrociously bad, and for so long, decades now. What does that mean? That can only mean one thing, that the theory that they're building these models on is false. That's the only conclusion that we can draw.
All right, so let's take the average listener out there who's driving around in a car listening to the Savage Nation, the millions of listeners on all these stations, and he says, okay, why is it that the Pope would join with these con men in the world of false science to push the idea of global warming? What is it? Isn't it follow the money? Isn't this a huge money grab for the New World Order?
It's funny you should mention this. This Schellenhuber has called for a new world order. He calls it the Great Transformation, in which he calls for a brand new, what he calls an Earth Constitution. And he calls for a global council, which he wants to have elected from every member. Oh,
my God. It's right out of the fascist... it's a fascist textbook this guy is espousing. Okay, so we know that there's an attempt at a power grab, a money grab, a world tax, controlling our economies through the guise of the environment. Anyone who disagrees is an apostate who should be imprisoned or worse. How in the world are we going to stop this juggernaut when Obama himself is involved in this big lie?
Boy, that's a great question. I think the only thing we could do is what we're doing right now. We could have these kind of discussions. There's no solid money behind the skeptical or real science effort like we're doing here. You hear, so Archbishop Sanchez Serrando said when he was called on these very things that we were talking about and made to answer questions about him, all he said was, oh, you must be deriving your money from oil. So
that's the standard lie that comes out of the radical left. That's right. Anyone who disagrees with them or shows evidence to the contrary is in the hands of the coal industry, which is ludicrous.
It is. I've never taken a penny. It's not that I wouldn't want to, but they don't offer the money. You go and ask for
yeah, in other words, you take coal money if they offered it. There is no coal money to support the truth here. It's a very bad situation, and particularly when so many gullible Catholics who are uneducated believe every word this man says. I would think that the middle class in America certainly can investigate the evidence for themselves, and they say, well, where do I look for skeptical opinions on global warming? You know what my answer is, Dr. Briggs? I always say look up the Vostok ice core samples, VOSTOK. I'm sure you're familiar with that one, right?
Sure. Yeah, the Vostok ice core samples show, they give an indication of both what the temperature was by proxy and the old CO2, what it was by proxy. And what they basically show is that the relationship is sort of inverted from what people think. Now, it's not that CO2 drives temperature, it's that temperature drives CO2. The greener it is on the planet, the more life there is, the richer life is, the more abundant life is, the better crops and trees grow, and therefore the better animals do. So that's what we're seeing now. In fact, things are not getting worse. Things are getting better. Well,
yes.
Localized problems, to be sure. There's always localized problems. But as far as a global pandemic, as far as the Earth, as Professor Schellenhuber would say, seeing us as some sort of disease or disruption, the opposite is true and easily verified to be true.
Doctor, what is your background? What field is it in, Dr. Briggs?
Originally, meteorology, atmospheric physics, climatology, and latterly, statistics and philosophy of science.
So you're a real scientist in climatology, and you're a dissenter, and they don't even want to believe a word you have to say, nor will they look at any of the evidence you present, correct?
Yes, that's a fact. You can't get a word in.
What of your writings can the average listener find right now? Is there anything that we can research or grab a hold of, buy, or whatever?
I have a website. It's wmbriggs.com. They could look up.
See that? You're not even selling a book. You're not even selling a book. You're too much of a purist, Dr. Briggs.
I'm not making any money on this. I'm losing money. I've had people turn me down for employment. They say, I don't want to work with a denier, or they don't want the political baggage that comes with working with people like me. It is not a winning proposition to take this side by any means.
You know, maybe I should set up a Skeptics Institute and fund it and bring in some money and hire people like you to disseminate the truth about global warming. I mean, maybe then we'll get somewhere if I set up a Skeptics Institute. Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be. It would be. You
know what's interesting, Dr. Briggs, before you go? I remember when I was a science grad student in my fields of learning, I remember reading a famous book in chemistry called The Skeptical Chemist. I'm sure as a science historian you know the book I'm referring to, written hundreds of years ago. The Skeptical Chemist, where the word skeptical is the key word here. What in the heck is wrong with being a skeptical climatologist? Why is the word skeptical not permitted to be discussed in the world of science anymore when it's the core belief of science which is to be skeptical?
There's too much money in the field. There's too much politics. The way it is now, government comes and they dictate, I want these results. And they find plenty of people lined up who say, well, I'm not going to give them exactly what they want. I'll give them what I think is right. But lo and behold, they find exactly what they were requested to find. And
I made a reference, Doctor, to the ex-Soviet system, the Lysenko affair, where the exact same thing happened. When the power structure in the Soviet Union wanted to prove something in genetics that was false, they mandated all scientists to prove it to be true. It's exactly what we're seeing here in the Lysenko affair. That's how I see it.
Let me tell you two things. That's exactly right. Lysenko, it is to be remembered, had colleagues executed for not towing the political line. Not banished, not just fired, not just disfunded, but actually executed or sent off to Siberia. And here's what we know.
Doctor, I've seen some of these leftist fanatics say that anyone who is a denier should be assassinated. I'm sorry, we're almost out of time. Give us your website again, Doctor.
It's wmbriggs.com. 2 G's.
It's wonderful having an intelligent voice of reason on the Savage Nation. Let's look one day to the Skeptical Institute by Michael Savage. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate it. I'll be right back.
Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. Here we have ISIS taking over one major city after another. And this clown is talking about climate change posing a threat to national security. Only in America could it get away with it because we no longer have a fourth estate. We have a fifth column with a single party of left-wing demagogues running everything from top to bottom. And I explained to you in some detail what went on in Germany in the 1930s on the birth of the Gestapo under Adolf Hitler, how it was done step by step, stage by stage. And I compared it to what he's doing to our police in this country, step by step, day by day, city by city. I'm not going to repeat myself. You're very lucky that you have me on the radio. I rarely blow my own horn. People think I'm very egotistical and I do too much of it, but you actually don't know I don't do much of it at all. The thing is that were it not for the quirks of the socialist government that you're living in, you wouldn't even be hearing me. I would have been a college professor of ethnobotany and never heard from, except in scholarly circles. But because they cauterized me through the fascism of liberalism and drove me away from the universities, I come before you fully developed and fully educated in so many areas. And as a result, I see the truth and I don't wait. Now, it has been written that God sees the truth but waits. Thomas Mann wrote that in one of his short stories. I was very impressed with it. And it was about the nihilism of Germany after World War I, before the Nazis arose during the liberal Weimar Republic. The country was out of control. Liberalism had destroyed the social order. Young gangs were roving the streets of Germany doing what they're doing today in America. And it was fascism that came along because the people were demanding law and order. And now we have the grand illusionist that we're dealing with. And you know what's hard for me to believe? Is that every day he gets worse. It's not as though, see, this is a pathology here we're dealing with. We're actually dealing with a very ill man. He is so demonically ill that he doesn't even realize does he realize what he's doing? I ask myself every day. How can a man get up every day and while looking at himself you get up, wash your face, go to the bathroom, you look at yourself in the mirror, you comb your hair, brush your teeth, whatever. Does he say to himself, what can I do to destroy white America today? How can I destroy the power structure every day? How can I weaken this country even further? Is that what he's doing? Because there's no other explanation for his activities. It's as though a man wakes up every day and says, how can I weaken the European-American dominance of this country? How can I make this country less racist, which is a code word for weakening white America? I'm sorry, you want a conversation on race? Didn't Eric Holder say we're cowards? Didn't Eric Holder say that we're too cowardly to have a discussion on race? Well, let's have a discussion on race. He wants us to talk about it. I am talking about it. I am so sick and tired of hearing how evil white men are. I am so sick and tired of hearing how oppressed the black people are. I am so sick and tired of hearing how great every Hispanic is that I want to have a conversation on race. So that's what we're doing. We're having a conversation on race. Since Eric Holder said that we're all cowards on it. White men are evil, Hispanics are all Einsteins, and black men are all oppressed. That's the narrative every day. And your poor daughter goes to college. This poor child you gave birth to has to go and listen to these communist cockamamie lunatics who tell her she has white privilege. She could have multiple sclerosis and come from a poor home. They'll tell her if she's European American, she has white privilege. That's what your daughter has to put up with, this massive Soviet-style propaganda under this grand illusionist. Now, if it's too much for you, I accept that. I look around, I see people in the streets, they don't want to know any of this. I have neighbors who are the biggest idiots I've ever seen in my life. They don't listen to the radio. They don't watch television. They actually proudly say, well, I don't watch TV news. I don't listen to no radio. I only listen to NPR. Good for you.